Thank you very much. Please be seated. And a good afternoon to all of you. Mr. Vice Chancellor, it's an honor to be in your school and to be part of this lecture. We recognize our Chair of Council, Mrs. Florence Hatchful, a dear friend as well, who is also here, and she endeavors to be at almost every major event of the university, so we appreciate her for that. And to recognize all the deans and registrar and heads of departments, I suppose, who are here, and faculty, staff, and students who are part of our gathering here. This is expected to be a lecture, but I thought it shouldn't be a lecture. So if at a point it doesn't look like a lecture, just know that I didn't want it to really be a lecture in that sense, but a conversation. So I will speak both formally and informally, because I am very passionate about what I will be saying today, and I don't want it to be cast in a language that goes on top of your head. Afterwards you say he spoke good English, but we don't really know what he said. So I hope to converse with each one of us. So I'm talking about how to bring about change in Africa, and some fundamental considerations, just some thoughts on how to bring about change in Africa. I think for every African, by the time you are old enough, probably in your 20s and 30s and upwards, you begin to ask yourself the question, what's wrong with us? What's wrong with us? Why can't we just seem to be able to fix our problems? And although I'm talking generally about Africa, in Ghana, Ghana is representative in a sense of Africa. So you ask yourself, what's wrong with us? I haven't lived for too long, but I've lived under every president of Ghana. I lived under Kwame Nkrumah as a young child. I lived under the NLC of General Ankara and General Kotoka and Afrifa in 1969, 66 to 69. I lived under the Prime Ministership of Dr. Buzia and the ceremonial presidency of Akufo-Addo the First, under General Ignatius, then Colonel Ignatius Kutu-Champong, and then under General F.W.K. Bukufu in 1978, and then the first coming of Lieutenant Rawlings in 1979, President Hila Liman in 79 to 81, the second coming of Rawlings in last day of 81, through to 2000. Then, of course, the more recent one, President Kufuor, President Atta Mills, Mahama I, Akufo-Addo, the second Akufo-Addo, and Mahama II. So I have lived through it all. I don't know whether that helps in any way, whether that's an asset or a liability. but having had all that experience, you ask yourself, why can't we fix our problems? Why do we go through all these changes literally without making any qualitative improvement in our lives? And I've spent much of my adult life deeply reflecting on this question because it is a major passion of mine, and I have spoken about this for so many years. For 40 years, I have been a champion of an African Renaissance or African transformation or emergence of the black man, however you couch it, or the fulfillment of the dream, or whatever it is. It's been my driving passion. So, after you've thought about a problem and you've seen efforts to solve it for so long, you have to pause at a point and ask yourself, am I even answering the right question? Because there is how many of you watch Mr. Bean? Okay. There's a parody of Mr. Bean, one of his episodes, and he's taking an exam. And he works so hard with all his antics. And eventually when they said time up, he realized that he had been answering the wrong question all along. Although he was making a lot of effort, including copying from people and changing erasers and changing pens and going down, all the antics, he was just answering the wrong question. So, part of what I have tried to do is ask myself, probably we are answering the wrong question. Maybe the problem we have been trying to solve is not the problem. It may not be the problem. Because if the problem you're trying to solve is not the problem, then you may solve it, but you won't solve the problem. So, what have we been trying to solve? I grew up as an Africanist and became very conscious of myself as an African in the 1970s. And so I read extensively and followed the African narrative, what's happening on our continent. And at that time, if those of you who were around in the 1970s, if you were not around, in reality, you were around probably through your parents. But, you know, the big issues on the African continent was the last phase of the colonial or decolonization project. And so there was a lot of emphasis on decolonization. We're thinking about Mozambique, we're thinking about Angola, Namibia, Zimbabwe, South Africa. And so these were the things that galvanized all of us to kick the white people out of our continent. Of course, our first president, Kwame Nkrumah, had assumed that would be the answer. On the dawn of independence, he also tried to answer the question. And this is how Nkrumah couched it in two statements. First, he says, seek ye first the political kingdom, and everything else will be added. So he felt that if we were able to resolve the political situation, then Africa's problems would be solved. And the political situation was basically colonialism, because the colonialists, whether it was the British in Ghana and other countries, or the French, or in some cases Portuguese or German, as it was in Namibia, whichever form the colonial enterprise was, in Nkrumah's thinking, if we got the colonialist out, everything will be added. And in a second statement on the eve and dawn of our independence, he said the independence of Ghana was meaningless unless it was linked up with the total liberation of Africa. So for most Africans and for most people who are black conscious, like myself, the enterprise of seeing the conclusion of the political domination of Africa was very important. It was going to be the culmination of everything that has been happening since we started fighting. And so, in a sense, every black conscious person was looking at the liberation. So when we saw Angola and Mozambique, and then later Namibia, Zimbabwe, and then I think later Namibia, and South Africa was the last push, and every one of us became South African. We were singing Nkosikelele Africa, Chocholozo, and all their songs, and we were pushing because somehow in our minds we felt if this last push takes place, we would start fixing our problem. And then South Africa became free. Then we realized we were answering the wrong question. I was one of the first people to go to free South Africa. And I was running all over South Africa. I was preaching in churches because I just believed we've cracked the code. I was preaching black awareness and African emancipation and all of that. And then I saw South Africans killing other Africans, sacking them from South Africa. I said, this is not how it's supposed to be. We were supposed to start seeing the solution at this time. And of course, if you study the politics in South Africa, it's just been one downward ride. So maybe Nkrumah's was reading the wrong question paper. And not only him, but all of them were reading the wrong question paper. Mugabe, Kenneth Kaunda, Julius Nyerere, Amilcar Cabral, Leopold Senghor, Hofwe Boigny, Jomo Kenyatta, all of them. Some of my favorites, like Samora Machel, maybe they were reading the wrong paper or the wrong question, or they're trying to solve something that was not a solution. So I started rethinking, and it's always humbling to know that you've thought something was it and it is not it, and you have to go back and start rethinking. So out of that came my probably refined understanding of what I think the African issue was and what we should be doing. And I will talk about a couple of them. At the fundamental, I think there are three layers of problems, or three conditions that we have to deal with. At the fundamental level is what I call the African cultural condition. And by that I mean who we are as a people without anybody. Who we are as a people, our culture, our worldview, our practices. And by culture, I don't mean the food we eat or the clothes we wear, but I'm thinking about our total understanding of the world and how we engage reality. how we engage life, how we engage our environment. That's at the fundamental problem. If that problem was not there, we could never have been colonized in the first place. Because if we were a strong country, no country could have colonized us. At the height of the British colonial enterprise in Ghana, they only had 350 public servants resident in Ghana. Not soldiers, public servants. And this would include teachers, headmasters, and district chief executives, and all of that. 300 British ruling us under colonialism. It was not an overwhelming power. It was a very flimsy power, but it ruled us. In Nigeria, they had about 500. Conquered almighty Nigeria and kept it together, including the violent divisions they have between the north, the south, and the east, and the southwest. Still, just 500 British. In South Africa, just a minority of white people ruled. And the story continues. So, how was it possible for us to be overcome by so little? So that's the fundamental, and I'll visit that. Then on top of that is colonialism. That is when Europe decided to come to Africa to look for raw materials. And they didn't come to form colonies, they just wanted to come to trade. But they've later realized that the people were also to be taken. So in trading with us, they took us and tried to form political entities with us. There was something good about colonialism, and it's not all bad. I think in a lot of ways, it gave us a lot of good things. First of all, without it, we would have been tribes, little tribes, with probably no prospect of amalgamation or coming together. The Ashantis were trying very hard to conquer all of us so that there would be a uniformity. But they were facing resistance from the coastal people, from the Fantis and from the Gans and from other people. And eventually, the coastal people teamed up with the British to fight the Ashantis. I mean, we can't say the Ashantis were kind people. They just wanted to colonize us. So it's not. The coastal people joined with British and said, these guys cannot take our land. But what I'm saying is, without colonialism, every 5 minutes you would have met another nation. Just think of the gap between Ada and the Volta region. And from there to here, if you're going on the Cape Coast Road, from Accra, you get to Ewutu, you get to Winneba, and different nations, different states, different languages, different systems, right through Cape Coast. By the time you hit the end on that region, you'll probably meet about 15 different states. Another 15. By the time you go through Ghana, there would have been about 250 republics. That is not viable. And because those small entities cannot create anything great. And we didn't think of ourselves as one. We didn't think of ourselves as one nation. So it was the colonialists who created the notion of nationhood in us. So they did some bad, but they also did some good. But that's what happened. Colonialism also introduced us to formal education, and so on and so forth, which we later used to get them out. But the colonialists were there. So that's the second bar of what I call the African question. Then there's the third bar. The third bar is what the young people see today. They think Ghana's problem is John Mahama or Akufo-Addo or Kufuor or Rawlings, because we think our problem started yesterday. So we attack the contemporary problems as if they are the problem. But that third layer, which most young people are fighting, does nothing to layer number 2 and layer number 1. So for the young people of today who think they have brilliant ideas trying to solve the African problem, they are actually answering not only the wrong paper, but the questions that were not asked. Because their world is very narrow, and because we don't teach history in our part of the world, we only reference what we are experiencing as the reality. So, what do we do? When Africans started fighting our problems, whether it was through the nationalist movements in Ghana, it was the Aborigines Rights Protection Society who felt that the rights of the indigenous people should be protected from the colonialist, chief of which was our land, must be protected. And our institutions like chieftaincy and our culture must be protected, that the British should not bastardize our system. So the effort to be free was driven by that. To protect our land, to protect our dignity, and so on and so forth. So the battle that was framed by the founding fathers of our continent, championed to a large extent, not solely, but to a large extent by our first Prime Minister and later President Kwame Nkrumah, was get the British and the colonialists out. Of course, that was also the struggle of the Aborigines and UGCC, JB Dankwa. Everybody said, get them out. The ways to get them out different, but everybody concluded, get them out. Get them out is good. So in trying to get them out, we romanticized the African past. And, when I became African conscious, I was a great student of negritude. Negritude was the black movement in the French countries. And I think they had probably the most profound ideas about blackness. So you had people like David Diop, President Houphouët-Boigny, Leopold Senghor, and these guys were promoting some very, very powerful ideas because, of course, they were dealing with French colonialism. But when they talk about Africa, it's almost as if we lived in paradise. And the white man came to disrupt our paradise. So we never examined the Africa that was there. We created a nice, nostalgic, wishful desire for that. So we went for that Africa. And so nobody examined. Simple questions was, if we were so great a people, how were we colonized? And much of Africa was colonized without war. In fact, in Ghana, the southern states were colonized with very little opposition. Only Ashanti resisted because they were an empire also seeking to colonize. So two colonizers met head on. Yeah, and Ashantis were colonizers. And it's not wrong. I mean, the world history is based on colonialism. Everybody is trying to conquer somebody. Until after the Second World War, where that was banned, everybody, whether you're European, everybody is trying to conquer somebody. That's how the world functions. So Ashantis were expanding their empire. They're beating up the Fantis, my people. You know, but nobody asked, why were we colonized? Why didn't we have developed systems? How could one gun terrify a whole bunch of Asafo companies? How could we sell our fellow human beings for gin, for rum, for trinkets, for guns? At the height of the slave trade, a horse traded higher than a human being. So what was it about our own worldview that made us cheapen each other the way we did? That had not kept up with civilization and development and all of that. All of that, nobody touched. Nkrumah didn't touch it. The negritude writers of France, of French West Africa, didn't touch it. Even in South Africa, when they were getting rid of apartheid, it was as if there was a perfect Africa that a white person came to rape. So then you get rid of the white person and realize your system is not as strong as you thought it was. As a matter of fact, the fundamental problems you have are in your system. That your culture, your worldview, left to itself, will not produce a civilization, will not produce change. So, having gone through all of that, the current Ghanaian people, and I listen to young people and their frustrations, and I sympathize with them, because not much has been given to them to work with. So you would hardly hear young people of today criticizing colonialism. They actually want to go there. They want to go and live with the colonialists. They think that is the best world. They think Europe is the best, and I mean, you hear them talking, and I said, just 50 years ago, this language was anathema. No sensible African would talk that way, that Europe is better, America is better, and look at this, and no African talked that way. Every African saw that as the problem. But now the young people don't see that as a problem, they actually see that as an aspiration. That's a different level. So the young people of today are not talking about colonialism or imperialism or neo-colonialism, which was the language of my generation. But I hardly hear any young person talk about that. Two, the young people are not talking about the African world before colonialism. The young people are only talking about the top layer of the problem they came to meet. And if we don't revise this, the young people, with all their zeal, with all their knowledge, will just fight hard, answer the question, and realize it wasn't even asked in the first place. It wasn't on the question paper. It's one thing is you answering the wrong question on the question paper. Another thing, this one did not appear. This question did not appear at all, but you created it and answered it. You know the old story out there. The guy who is going to take a course and he's learnt about the tree, a particular tree, and his apple didn't show up. And then he says, and there was this bird, and the bird flew to the tree. At this point, we will ask, what is a tree? That's what I think the young people are doing. They are creating a question that they are not answering. So, getting back to where we were. So what was wrong with the African before colonialism? What did we miss? What went wrong? Were we cursed? Was this the devil's headquarters? You know, which a lot of Christians believe that there were curses and ancestors and gods and idolatry and all of that. That's a simplistic way of looking at it. Actually, the answer is also quite simple. It had nothing to do with us, necessarily. You have to study world history to know why Africa was where it was. The centers of world civilization happened around a certain axis. Ancient Phoenicia, ancient Carthage, which would be around North Africa, ancient Egypt, ancient China, India. In that axis, which later became the Silk Road, people from China, from Japan, from India met people along the way. That is all. He said, I can finish my lecture at this time. So what happened? Because along that corridor, there was not only trade of goods, but trading of ideas. So from Africa, concepts like mathematics and algebra and all of that emerged. From Greece and from Rome, concepts of literature and the ideas of democracy and managing of people and nation states, and all of these ideas were going on. The Chinese were inventive and creating the paper and gunpowder. Indians were, so you have people in a certain corridor who are learning from each other. Trading ideas, refining ideas, and this went on for hundreds of years. Probably around 9 BC coming on, that's 900 years before AD. And then, after the fall of the Roman Empire, everything seemed to have collapsed, and then it started again. All of this discourse of knowledge, of experience, of how to organize, how to build nations, how to build states, how to count, how to read, how to reason, what is logical, what is illogical, all of that was going on without us. So somebody said, why without us? Because we had a huge physical barrier. The Sahara Desert. There was some movement, but it was sporadic from ancient Mali to Timbuktu. Brought some knowledge, but you had to travel a long way across the desert to get to where the centers of knowledge were swelling. So for hundreds of years, everybody's learning something. We were also learning, but at a very, very, very slow, painful, laborious, and very linear way. Linear way in the sense that what you know is what you know. Nobody challenges what you know. You don't learn from anybody. So yes, you know your proverbs, you know your culture, but it's what you know. You know, it happens these days. You know, if you come from certain villages, I mean, if you leave the village people to stay there for 50 years and go to visit them, there'll be practically no change because they are isolated. Nobody goes there, or there are people leave and they don't go back. So, no improvement. So for thousands of years, I would say probably about 3,000 to 4,000 years of human civilization. As it grew, certain people were isolated. And there are various areas which were isolated. And that created a huge development deficit for those people. I've talked about Africa, but we're not the only one. Australia was also isolated by the Pacific Ocean. So they had people there, people that were the Aborigines in New Zealand, the Maoris and all of that. They were not participating in this conversation. So by the time the world meets them, it's like the world has left them behind 2,000 years. Not only that, North America, the place we now call the United States, it was populated by people, but they also didn't participate. So their civilization, as relevant as it was to them, was cut off from this flow of massive conversation going on in the world. So North America suffered. In South America, there was some kind of civilization in around Mexico, the Aztecs and so on. But if you see how easy it was for them to be conquered, then you also then wonder how strong was that civilization. So you find that every region of the world that was either cut off by big water bodies or unproductive land mass like ours suffered a deficiency. That deficiency is at the heart of our problems. Somebody said, well, but we've been dealing with Europe and all of that. It's true. But we've been dealing with it on their terms. So when we got integrated, I wouldn't even say integrated, when we got into touch with Europe, in terms of understanding how things work, they were ahead of us. They were not better human beings. It's just like you're not a better human being when you go to your village. But when you go to your village and you've come from Accra, even the village chief is at your beck and call. Because you brought some fabric, you brought some tins of milk, and all of a sudden the village chief, unfortunately, whatever you tell him, what he does. It happens. It's not that he's not smart, but it's just that by virtue of what you've been exposed to and what you have, it is very easy for you to dominate him. That is what happened to us. It's not colonialism. Colonialism only exacerbated an already existing condition. It's not so much the leaders we've had. Yes, our leaders have been problematic. But you know, crazy leaders have been all over the world. When the large population thinks right, they can tolerate a crazy person for a while. And it won't change anything much because the knowledge base of the society is strong. You just have to study British history. They've had some very crazy kings, Russians have had terrible people. All of them have had all kinds of people. Some of them are even called terrible. Like Ivan the Terrible. So people have had bad leaders, but somehow they emerged from it. So at this point when I get here, I said, so how do we change this? So what should we be doing? Because something must change in the culture. Something must change. And cultural change is the most difficult change because it almost seems as if somebody is insulting you when he points out something that is wrong in your culture. So nobody touches it. The World Bank will give us money, but they know we'll come for more because they know the culture that produces that dependency has never been examined. But they can't talk about it because we'll feel they are insulting us. Can you imagine if one day the World Bank rep of Ghana says, you Ghanaians are lazy people? Hey, Matakam. Do you think he can say that? Even if he feels that, he can never say that because he is touching culture, behavior. That's your area. So even if they know it, they will never speak about it because it's offensive. Just like you go to your village and something is going on wrong, you can't say it. You just give them money and leave. You can say, hey, I should go and say it. Hey, what, they will be angry with me. So you just give them money and leave. so that's what they are doing. The world is just they give us money and leave because they know you are not even ready to deal with the issue. So no foreign country can help us. The Chinese will come, take what they can and leave. And whilst they're leaving, they say, these Africans are crazy. What is wrong with them? But they can't say we are crazy because we'll be offended. They can't say we are stupid, we'll be offended. They can't say we don't think, we'll be offended. So all every nation is doing to us is they rape us, they rape our resources, speak nice things about us, and leave. But if you really encounter them, they will tell you, we don't know what's wrong with these guys. Don't they think? What they take for granted happened over 4,000 years. We cannot take it for granted. We have to create it artificially or purposefully. So, what is my solution? I have only 3 solutions. They are not even solutions, 3 suggestions, considerations. I have studied nations for years. And I have tried to figure out what kind of changes take place in a society to change it. You know, we talk about Singapore and all of that, and people say it's Lee Kuan Yew is the leader and all of that. So we need a Lee Kuan Yew in Ghana. I'm telling you, we will never get a Lee Kuan Yew in Ghana. We won't get anybody called Lee. Neither can you get anybody called Kwan. And there'll be no you coming in Ghana. So forget about it. But we said Singapore was like us. Malaysia was like us. And recently, even in Africa, we've seen Rwanda. And people say, we need one leader who stays for a long time. You see, you can stay for 1,000 years. If you are answering the wrong question, you would deepen the problem of the people. Longevity is not the answer. It's not that they stayed for long. We don't even need people to stay for long. I mean, I'm not against people staying for long, but that's not the answer. I've looked at China from where they were after the Cultural Revolution. Just what did they do differently? And this is my observation, that every nation that has pushed itself out created a culture of accuracy and precision. A culture of accuracy and precision. Because that is the fundamental basis of civilization. Accuracy and precision. It has been said that no straight lines occur in nature. No straight lines. Wherever you see straight lines, you know somebody has intentionally interfered in a process. Rivers do not flow in a straight line. Mountain ranges are not in straight lines. Just nature left alone will not construct a straight line. So if you study every nation, whether it's Europe themselves, how Britain became industrialized, and if you look at current nations that have done well, they started because they became obsessed for whatever reason. Either a leader enforced accuracy and precision and would tell them, we're not going to do anything basa-basa again. So if you check, the first mark that a nation is about to develop, there is accuracy. And it starts with sanitation. They get rid of disorder in the environment. They demarcate things better. They stay in confined boundaries. They determine where something starts and where something ends. They start developing a precise way of talking. They become almost mathematical in the way they reason. It happened in Singapore, happened in Malaysia, it happened in much of Asia. Because, you know, when I was growing up, the poorest countries in the world, you know, the acronym for poorest countries, it was the ACP countries. It's not African Concrete Products. ACP countries was Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific. We were the basket cases, the ACP countries. Nobody uses that again. Because the P have sorted themselves out. The Pacific countries, Asia, Southeast Asia. The C is sorting themselves out. Only the A is left. Transformation starts with a culture of precision and accuracy. So if we want to do that in CU, it means that we have to start paying attention to demarcations. You drink from water, from a bottle, you don't throw it away. That creates a consciousness of an intentional behavior. Because until people have a consciousness to act intentionally and purposefully, they cannot generate development. That is why in most countries, when military leaders take over, for a short while, the nations do well. I'm not saying forever. Because sometimes, whilst they are enforcing precision and accuracy at one level, they are destroying it at the thought level. But even in Ghana, we've seen that. We saw that when General Champong took over in 72. Precision and accuracy. There was a certain kind of orderliness. And our nation started. I mean, agriculture, things were doing well. We saw it at the beginning of Gerald Rawlings. But then sometimes, whilst they are enforcing accuracy and precision, they stifle the thinking of the people and expression of the people. Then it counters all the good they've done. We've seen it in some of the military countries in the Sahel region now. It's because when people are conscious that they will do the right thing, they will develop. You would never go to a developed country and find things happen haphazardly. People urinating by the roadside. They see a free space, they come and set up a kiosk. They see this, the land is there, they go and galamsey it. There's no precision, there's no orderliness. And so far as we don't change that, and that is how our ancestors behaved. Because precision and accuracy is not natural. It came through the discovery of mathematics in North Africa. That's why the pyramids were built. Precision and accuracy helps you to lift loads, you organize yourself well, and there is calculated action, and so on and so forth. So, if we want to make Central University a microcosm of a developed Africa, then we have to create a university of precision and accuracy. And those of you students, you cannot be haphazard and change anything. Now, that will not change all our culture. But what it does is once people begin to see the cause and effect, they begin to desire more and more of accuracy and precision. It affects everything. It affects taxation. It affects the whole nation. So that's the first thing. How can a country do that? The laws must be enforced. I am very particular about human settlements, where people settle and live. If you live in a place where animals and human beings are eating and drinking and defecating in the same river, I haven't seen any civilization where that happens. It doesn't happen. When I read Lee Kuan Yew's book about Singapore, one of the first things he did was that. And he said that in his country, the people rear pigs, and they live with their pigs, like we live with our animals. And they had to stop. And people would cry and say, "You are breaking the culture. This is our ancestors." Yeah, you have to stop living with pigs. Pigs don't live in the bedroom. They don't live in human habitations because there are all kinds of diseases and infections. So they start apportioning. This is where you live. This is what you do. This is what you do. This is where the road is. This is where the gutter is. This is where da 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 da. Those who are old enough will remember when the British were here. That's how Ghana was organized. So if you go and take any picture of Accra or Kumasi or Cape Coast, from the 1950s, the first thing you ask yourself, is this Ghana? Because they understood precision and accuracy. Number one. Number two, we have to create a future-minded culture. That means that every generation must be obsessed with how to protect the future generation and make life better for the future generation. Of course, if we're thinking that way, there will be no Galamsey, would it be? Then we'll manage our resources well and not spend everything at one go. Because no sensible father does that. You don't get paid on payday, you cash all your money. And say, man must live. We will die, so we shouldn't sleep. No sensible person does that. You don't cash all your money and blow all your money on payday. Why? Because you know tomorrow will come. And there will be a time called 23rd of the month. And 24th. And those are very wicked days in every month. So you're future-minded. And you say, how far should I stretch this? How far do I live so that when that day comes, I'm ready? How should I live so my children don't come and say, Daddy, I want food? We say, well, I ate. That's what we ate the first day. When we had the party, it was your food. That's what we... No, you're future-minded. Our ancestors, I must say, and I can get a lot of flack for this, were not future-minded. Because future-mindedness comes when people can see the future as a reality. The future must be real to them. Because if you are future-minded, you cannot sell all the young men in your village into slavery. So what made us sell people into slavery? And by the way, the British did not go to conquer slaves. They stayed in their boats at the coast and waited for the merchants to bring the people. People sold their children, sold their husbands, their wives. Chiefs sold their people because they wanted to get a gun, they wanted to get something. That's a history we don't like talking about. We talk about the greed of the white man, but not the recklessness of the African, which has not changed anyway. And the white man's greed has also not changed. So if we all remain the same, as they say, all things remaining constant, a reckless generation and a greedy generation, we would never survive. So we have to be mindful of the future. At the personal level, it includes things like saving for the future, contributing to a pension fund, all of that, just constantly being aware that the future is a reality. And I have to prepare for it. One day I'm going to get old. One day you'll be 70, you'll be 80. Where are you going to live? So you have to prepare for it. One of the things that really gets on me in Ghana is, once in a while somebody will come and ask Ghanaians, you help me because I was an actor and I entertained you and now life is hard. And then people say, Ghanaians, they're, a nation that does not honor its heroes is not worth dying for. Oh, let's stop that. Was the person not a human being? Wasn't he a human being? I mean, why do we treat people as if they are permanent infants and exonerate them from their actions? You played for Black Stars. You fought in the boxing ring. You sang. Didn't it occur to you that one day you'll grow? reckless and then feel that somebody owes us a living. We have to be future-minded. And it's not just at the state level. I mean, the government may make a mistake, but remember, the government people were like you and I before. We have new government now. The people, who were they before? Huh? They were here. Some were probably in this school. Some were lecturers, some were teachers, they were everywhere. Leaders are not manufactured from outside society. So the pathology of the society affects its leaders because the leaders emerge from the society. So we have to create a culture, a future-minded culture. And the final thing, we have to build a culture of cause and effect. That is why we have to move away from the magical world. The magical world. One of the major challenges we have as Africans, Ghanaians, is we are magical people. We feel things happen that you can't explain. Cause and effect. We see effect, but we don't go and look for cause. We create cause, but we don't look for effect. One of the early lessons of civilization is cause and effect. Jesus put it this way: give and it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over. What you are getting is what you sowed. Sowing and reaping. Seed time and harvest time. Cause and effect. So, in a nation where a team is going to play football and they have divorced training, good strategy, good team from winning, and they feel if they can go and tie their enemies, you have to tie them and make incantations while you are tying them. And the goalkeeper goes and touch one goal post and makes his incantation. Touch another post, make incantations and just say, it's crossed. We do it in football. We do it in politics. Instead of winning based on program, we're going for prayers. We're going for somebody to prophesy. It is all a magical mindset. We haven't been able to divorce ourselves from a magical world, whether it's in the church or outside the church. And the church people realize that people are like that. So give them magic. Somebody dies, we don't check what was wrong. We just, he was walking here. No, we just saw him. Boom, he's dead. Hey, this world is dangerous. Oh, this world. Hey, you have to be careful. Oh, you have to. This world. Hey, people are wicked. People are wicked. The man was just walking here. Boom, they've killed him. They've killed him. Nobody goes to check his blood pressure, check his diabetes. We don't check anything because we just believe it just happened. There's no explanation. How can you learn? How can you master your environment when you have a world without cause and effect? At the heart of our challenge are some assumptions. And I think these three considerations can help us resolve. And as a school community, we have to be conscious and say, let's build a society where these three cultures are built. So a student comes to Central University, he has to know accuracy and precision. You have to know the number of steps you take from your hostel to Trinity Hall. You should know. You should know how many minutes it takes you to do everything. I used to be able to, I got obsessed with it. I used to be able to predict time to the minute. I do it sometimes too. Because I'm constantly conscious of time. Once I came to sit here, I was measuring the distance from here to here and there and trying to look for the way out. Because when fire comes, I'm not going to pray, I'll just go. I'm not going to pray about it. Boom, I'm gone. Whenever I enter a room, I size up the room. I size up everything, the dimensions, and I try to figure out, how do you get out of this place? So you have to live with a world of constantly being aware of your environment, what is happening there, what it takes you to move from A to B, how many minutes it takes you, how many seconds it takes you when you go to eat, how many minutes does it take you to eat. Everything should become a part of you. The British became a major industrial nation, a tiny island, for several reasons, but one of which was time. That's why there's the Big Ben clock there. Time. People to be time conscious, produce on time, manufacture on time, because time and labor that is timely was critical for mass production. But if you were not timely and you just say, we'll just pray about it. When are you going to finish producing the thing? Pastor, I don't know. So we'll just pray. We'll see what God will do. The tailor says, you see what God will do. The carpenter will see what God will do. The lecturer, when will you finish marking the papers? As for this, I can't tell. I'm just praying. There are so many things happening. I've got a funeral. There's no accuracy and precision. And we cannot build that way. So that's how, at this point in my life, I am resolving the African conundrum. I'm not trying to deal only with colonialism, neocolonialism, and imperialism, which is still working. It's still working, it's still there. But it only takes advantage of the weakness I have. And if I don't solve my weakness, it will always take advantage of me. I'm not only trying to solve the problem of who is president, who is not president, which party is in power, who is not in power, because they will come and go. But I'm more mindful of the society that is producing the people. Because if you get the machine right, the products will be right. Forget it. If people become more conscious of these, whoever emerges leader of this country will be a good one. Because they have inculcated the ideals, and then we will be able to vote sensibly. With our best interest in mind. Thank you very much.